in Barbados and the region by Dr. Richard Ishmael, consultant cardiologist, on the occasion of World Heart Day, September 29, 2021. We thank you for joining us for a lecture. We will start promptly at 6 p.m. So we ask that you kindly keep your microphones muted when not speaking. Please note that there will be 2 question and answer segments during the evening's proceedings. The first following the lecture, and the second Q&A after the video and testimony. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat at any time, and note that the chats will also be monitored for any technical or other challenges throughout the evening. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to all of our guests joining us on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. We will now have a word of reflection by Reverend Belinda Martindale, followed by the welcome from the Chief Executive Officer of the Heart&Stroke Foundation, Mrs. Michelle Daniel.
Good evening, everyone. Let us pray. Dear Father, we're thankful this evening that we can be enlightened from the expertise of the knowledge and skills to be shared by our presenters. We pray, God, you bless them, that as they speak, the rest of us will understand clearly and will be inspired. I pray, God, indeed for your guidance, that everything will flow well, because indeed this is a very important topic, even on this World Heart Day. Be with us, Lord, and we thank you for all you're going to share with us via our presenters. And we say thank you again. Amen.
Amen. No vision can be realized without heart. Distinguished speakers and members of the audience across all platforms, locally, regionally, and internationally, a warm September welcome to the 2021 celebration of World Heart Day. We at the Heart&Stroke Foundation of Barbados, Inc. invite each one of you to take this journey this evening with acclaimed cardiologist, Dr. Richard Ishmael, to get a preview of a rekindled support system and to hear a heartfelt story from one of our cardiac patients. World Heart Day was created by the World Heart Federation to inform people around the globe that cardiovascular disease, which includes heart disease and stroke, is the world's leading cause of death, claiming 18.6 million lives each year, and to use the opportunity to highlight the actions that individuals can take to prevent and control cardiovascular disease. It is a global campaign during which individuals, families, communities, and governments around the world participate in activities to take charge of their heart health and that of others. Closer to home, we have selected Heart Matters because heart matters. The 2021 international theme for today is Use Heart to Connect, a broad and all-encompassing theme. And there are so many ways we can accomplish this. We can use heart to show we care for others, to build knowledge and awareness, and to build community spirit. The pioneers who saw the need for and started the provision of cardiac services in Barbados many years ago, the first 2 or 3 persons to say, we need to create a space to help survivors like ourselves, or the first person on the planet to be brave enough to share their personal survivor story in public. In each of these scenarios, and for slightly different reasons, the use of heart was evident. Whether you are a medical student or a seasoned practitioner, a survivor of a cardiac event, a caregiver, or simply an individual fascinated by the strides made in the provision of medical services, we invite you to listen attentively this evening and ask your questions, which you are free to enter in the respective chats at any point during the evening. And now I wish to introduce the chairman for this evening's proceedings. Dr. Jeffrey Massey is a cardiologist in private practice. He's a medical graduate of the University of the West Indies and has been associated with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as a student, medical intern, and medical registrar before going to London to complete postgraduate training in internal medicine, then returning to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as a consultant cardiologist, a post he held for 30 years before his recent retirement. He has been involved in the Heart Foundation of Barbados from its first year of inception, long before it became the Heart&Stroke Foundation of Barbados. Under the auspices of Dr. Basil Springer, he lectured at our annual business seminars and has done several public lectures on behalf of HSFB, including the World Heart Day lecture many years ago. He remains active in HSFB to the present time, as evidenced by his chairmanship of tonight's meeting. As I hand over to him, I ask each one of you, each one of us, how can we use heart to connect? In our eating choices, in our decision to exercise and adopt a healthy, regular exercise regimen, in terms of our buying choices in our supermarkets, in terms of connecting with each other. And so without any further ado, I will now hand you over to the chairman of the evening, Dr. Jeffrey Massey. Remember, use heart to connect because our hearts matter. Thank you. Dr. Massey, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you very much for the Heart Foundation for involving me in this activity as chairman for tonight. And more importantly, to introduce the main speaker, who is not only my colleague, but my friend, Dr. Richard Ishmael. Dr. Ishmael is a graduate of the University of the West Indies Medical School, having graduated in 1974. He then took off to the United States for further training in pediatrics and then eventually pediatric cardiology, finishing this odyssey by 1981. He then returned to Barbados and worked as a pediatrician between 1982 and 85 and took off again to strengthen his training in pediatric cardiology. Richard returned in 1985 and took up the mantle of serving the pediatric cardiac community. He worked very hard to deal with pediatric problems in Barbados. And you know, it is said that when Alexander the Great destroyed the Persians after his third battle at Tyre, he sat and he cried because he had nothing more to conquer. Richard the Great didn't do like Alexander, because when he conquered pediatric cardiology in Barbados, he then took up his mobile echo machine and gave services to the region, St. Vincent, Dominica, Antigua, Trinidad, and St. Lucia. These services were done on weekend as he single-handedly boarded Liat and served the entire Caribbean. This service is recognized through the honors that he's been given. First by his local association, BAP, for his work in pediatric cardiology, by the Caribbean Cardiac Society, similarly for his work in pediatric cardiology throughout the region. It extended to New York, where the Council of Barbadian Organizations of New York honored him for his untiring commitment and selfless dedication in providing health care to the people of Barbados and to the region. Internationally, his work was recognized by the offer of the Sir James Carreras Award by the Variety Clubs, again, for his contribution and commitment to health and well-being of needy children. I can think of no one better qualified to give this lecture of the services of cardiology in Barbados and the region than tonight's speaker, Dr. Richard Ishmael.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for that kind introduction. Very, very kind. Thank you. Let me just start off by thanking the Heart Foundation, Mrs. Daniel, for inviting me here to give this presentation on World Heart Day. It is indeed a pleasure for me to do so, as I was, in fact, and many of you may not know this, I'm a member of the Heart Foundation of Barbados. I remember sitting with Trevor Hassel and Drew Simmons in Drew's living room in Wilcox Terrace in Christchurch in early 1985, talking about and planning the start of the foundation. I was indeed very keen on getting this foundation going. It was, I actually had returned to Barbados in 1982 as a young cardiologist trying to develop a cardiac program in the QEH. I had not got very much traction from the Ministry of Health, and I thought that under the auspices of the Heart Foundation, and that I would be able to develop a program at the QEH to be able to deliver care to very needy Barbadians. However, later on in 1985, when presenting a paper at the World Congress of Pediatric Cardiology, of what we were doing here in Barbados, I was actually recruited back to New York. One of my former bosses, Ruben Cooper, who had offered me a job before I left to return to Barbados in '82, came at me again and asked me if I wanted to return to New York. I thought about it for a while, and then I decided that I would go. Why did I go? Cardiology was expanding very rapidly in the 1980s with new technologies and so on. I had been back in Barbados for 3 years, and the technologies were passing me by. There were new stuff in Echo, new stuff in the Cath Lab, and so on. So I returned then to Barbados, and when I returned to Barbados back in 1988, I actually came back with the intention of developing a cardiac program. And I will explain that as I go on in my talk. And I put all of my energies into it. When Miss Daniels called me and asked me that she wanted me to talk on this World Heart Day, I was a little bit unsure of what I would talk about at first. And then as I had recently retired from the QEH back in 2019, just under 2 years ago, I thought that the best thing for me to do, or the most appropriate talk, was to review the development of the cardiac services at QEH and in the region. As Jeff Massey said, I really traveled about the region a lot in my early days. So I will start off basically, and I would like the cardiologists and medical people to pardon me if I do a little bit of this. This is what I normally do with my patients, and I think that a lot of our audience are non-medical people. The heart is a 4-chamber pump with 2 sets of one-way valves. There are 2 atria that receive blood. There are 2 ventricles that pump blood. There are 4 valves, a tricuspid and a mitral valve that connect the atria with the ventricles. There's a pulmonary valve that carries blood into the lungs, and there's an aortic valve that carries blood into the body. The heart has a plumbing system via coronary arteries that come out to the aorta and go into the heart muscle and supply the heart muscle with blood. And it has an electrical system that runs the heart. Cardiac disorders are divided into structural problems. This is a child with a hole in the heart, and that is a structural problem. Other problems that we can have is if you have leaking or stenosis valves, that's a structural problem. You have dilated hearts and heart muscles that don't function well, such as a dilated cardiomyopathy, or you may have a thick ventricle heart, such as a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The main cardiac problem that we see as you get older is a plumbing problem. And this plumbing problem starts when there is atherosclerotic plaque that is deposited into the coronary arteries. The rupture of which and the thrombosis in that area there is what causes a heart attack in most people. Now, when one gets an electrical problem, what happens is that there's a malfunction in the electricity of the heart, which causes arrhythmias. You see normal beats here, and then you see an abnormal beat here. I don't want the audience to go away by thinking that they're not interconnected, because structural problems can cause arrhythmias, plumbing problems can cause structural problems and cause arrhythmias also. So having given the audience that introduction, let's just start off the formal part of the discussion. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, cardiovascular disease had become the most common cause of mortality in Barbados, replacing infectious diseases. This was related to better living conditions, the introduction of immunization and vaccinations, and that vaccination introduction is a hot topic nowadays when we talk about COVID. The widespread use of antibiotics, the above leading to decreasing numbers of deaths from malnutrition and infectious diseases, leading to increasing life expectancy. There was an increase in non-communicable diseases and an increase in caloric intake and obesity. Now, also, the opening of the Pre-Elizabeth Hospital in 1965, followed soon after by the introduction in 1967 of final year medical students teaching on its wards by the University of the West Indies, saw better conditions for patients, better working conditions for doctors, and an influx of medical specialists to a staff portion. The opening of specialty clinics, medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics and gynecology, and so on. There were better laboratory and X-ray facilities and better diagnostic capabilities at the QEH. I am no longer, okay. Now, when I came out of Barbados in 1982, what was here in the cardiological world? There was a cardiac unit in place put together by Trevor Hassel, and it had mainly congenital and rheumatic heart patients there. Hassel had also put together a cardiac unit with ECG and phonocardiographic services in place. But what was most important for me was that there was a real-time 2D echocardiogram machine. This was most important. And in fact, before I decided to return to Barbados, I called them to Barbados to make sure that there was an echo machine, a 2D machine then. Because two-dimensional echocardiography had just come out in the late 70s. And for me, it would have been very difficult to practice cardiology without it. So I always hail up Trevor for having an echo machine in Barbados when I came back. There were 6 beds in medical ICU, and they had cardiac cath facilities available in a special procedures room in the X-ray department. It was a bit antiquated, but if I needed to do a cardiac catheterization on the patient, particularly to check pulmonary pressures, I could do it. Next slide. Somebody's working my slides. I'm not working it. So, what did I face? There were large numbers of children and young adults with congenital and rheumatic heart disease, and increasing numbers of adults with coronary artery disease. That is what we face in the cardiology clinic. Next slide. Now, what was available cardiac surgery-wise in Barbados in 1982? There was an open heart surgical unit at University Hospital of the West Indies in Jamaica. And in fact, that was the only open heart surgery in the industry in Barbados. However, they were only limited and only an average of 28 patients were done per year. And Trevor told me that there were only about that were sent per year. Few Barbadians could afford to go to USA, Canada, or surgery, or England for surgery. There was no open heart surgery available at the QEH, and there was limited heart surgery. Professor Warren in the early days did PDA ligations and coarctation repairs, and while he was at the QEH, Sir Edison did mitral commissurotomies. No open heart surgery was available in Trinidad. Next slide, please. Now, we were extremely fortunate in Barbados at that time with the situation that was happening in New York. North Shore University Hospital was in a small town in Manhasset in New York. For those of you who know New York, and I'm sure a lot of you have been there, New York City is where with Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island is where in the 60s and 70s were all the major medical facilities. North Shore was a community hospital, and if there were any residents of Long Island and they needed cardiac or neurosurgery, they had to drive an hour or hour and a half into Manhattan to the big university hospitals like Columbia and Cornell and NYU, where I actually did my training for surgery. So what North Shore wanted to do was to develop an open heart program that would serve the people of Long Island. Now, they have recruited, can you go back, please? There were cardiac surgeons, adult and pediatric cardiologists trained to establish a cardiac surgical program in this suburban community. I was extremely fortunate that two of the cardiac surgeons who had gone out to Long Island just before I left New York were colleagues of mine at NYU. When I was doing my cardiology there, they were doing their cardiac surgery. And then my former boss, Mike LaCourte, who was at Brookdale, they recruited him out to North Shore to set up a pediatric cardiology program there. Next slide. So basically, North Shore were looking for patients to help build their program, and QEH was looking for hospitals to send the patients to. Surely a symbiotic relationship. The gods seem to have come together for us at that time. Next slide, please. So in 1982, soon after I got back here, we were able to set up a program at North Shore University Hospital, whereby patients with congenital and rheumatic heart disease were investigated in Barbados. I did the echoes, and if I needed to class them, I did. And later on, we added adults with valvular and coronary artery problems. They were added to the mix. Initially, in the first 5 years, they were at no cost to us, and then later at a subsidized cost of $10,000. US per patient. bearing in mind that the market cost for heart surgery at that time in the US was $45,000 to $50,000. Next patient, next slide. So after I had been back in Barbados for a year, as Jeff Massey said, I started to look to the other islands. By that time, a few of my colleagues, classmates had returned to St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and in Grenada. And I also developed a relationship with a pediatrician in Trinidad called Dr. David Bratt. And what I started to do then with St. Lucia, St. Vincent first, and that was before the echo days. I would go to St. Lucia or St. Vincent for 2 or 3 days. The pediatricians or the internists would gather the clinics. They would make sure that patients had ECGs and echoes. I would do a clinic for 1 or 2 days, and we would document all the patients and so on. We would prioritize them. If they needed then relatively urgent surgery and I needed to echo them or cast them in Barbados, then it would come up to Barbados for me to do that. And if not, and I was fairly sure of the diagnosis, we can then make arrangements for them to go directly to North Shore. We added Dominica and Antigua later on in the process. Now, what happened also later on is that Varieties Club International donated a portable echo machine. Next slide, please. And here is the echo machine, as you can see it here. And this is me in Trinidad. This was a particularly interesting time. Trinidad actually did have an echo machine on the wards of the Port of Spain Hospital. So when I used to go to Trinidad, that wasn't a problem. I would meet with the pediatricians. I never saw adults in Trinidad. They had an adult cardiologist. They had 2. They had Rashid, Rahman, and Vincent. But I would meet with the pediatricians. There was no pediatric cardiologist there. We would start echoing patients at 10 o'clock, like 8 in the morning. I echoed for the whole day. They would just give me a break at lunchtime to give me a roti and a red solo. But it worked, right? Now, what happened at this time is that the machine in Trinidad at the Port of Spain Hospital went down. And our Williams Medical Science Complex was starting up, and they had 2 echo machines there, but they did not allow the echo machines to be brought down to the Port of Spain. So David Bratt asked me to come down and do a clinic down there, which I did with my portable machine, and we ended up on the front page of the Sunday Guardian. Next slide, please. Now, so our program actually did very well. As I told you very early on, when I was recruited back to New York in 1985, it was at the presentation of this paper at the World Congress of Pediatric Cardiology in New York. I presented a paper on the collaborative cardiac diagnostic and surgical program in a small island community for the management of patients with congenital and rheumatic heart disease. My co-authors were, that's not Tony Harris, that is Tom Harris. Tom Harris was an interventional radiologist who actually helped me in the Cath Lab when I was at Kathleen in the special procedures room. Trevor Hassel played a lot of patients, and Mickey Warren did PDA ligations on patients who need PDAs done. We then, and we always, in the department, always made sure that we published what we actually did. And I also presented a paper at the 33rd CCRC meeting in 1988, paper entitled The Caribbean and New York, the Heart Connection, in which we reported on 242 patients, most patients with congenital heart disease who had surgery in New York with an extremely good surgical mortality of 3.2%. Next slide, please. So when the program with North Shore ended in 2005, we had about 492, mainly children operated on at North Shore. 202 of those were from Barbados, and the rest were from the region, with a surgical mortality of 3%. Next slide, please. Now, this program was not sustainable on a long-term basis. Remember that it started off because they were looking for patients, and I was looking to send patients elsewhere. Their program got very, very big, and financial constraints of the hospital did not allow large volumes of patients anymore. In fact, North Shore, from where they started, are now the second largest pediatric cardiac center in New York State. They started from where they were in 1980 or 81. We also were getting more patients here as we started to get patients operated on. All the patients with valve problems and who had coronary artery problems started to present themselves. And so there was really a clear indication that we needed to have an invasive cardiology or cardiac surgical program needed to be developed locally. Next slide. Next slide, please.
It's there, but
okay, and as I have told you before, I had relocated back to New York in 1985, and I was at Barbados North Shore hospitals. But the provision that I made with them is that they wanted me back in New York. They had to allow me to come down to Barbados for a week, three times per year to do clinics in the islands. Sometimes I came to Barbados, I would come down 3 times a year for a week, spend a couple of days in St. Lucia, spend a couple of days in St. Vincent, and so on. And by that time, we had an echo machine. So I was able to run that clinic from New York by coming down to Barbados and the other islands 2 or 3 times per year. Now, there was a political change in 1986 when Harold Barrow became Prime Minister. Mr. Barrow died in 1987. With a change of government, we had a very progressive Minister of Tate. Branford Tate became the Minister of Health. I happen to have known Branford, and in one of my trips down to Barbados, I asked to meet with him, and then I made a proposal to the minister about developing a cardiac program in Barbados. I use one of the things that I use is, and I always tend to use that, I usually tell the administrators that when infectious diseases killed people in Barbados and in the region, we had to get immunizations and antibiotics. Now that heart disease is what is killing people, it is very important that we be able to take care of that. So I put my case towards to Mr. Tate. He listened intently. He asked me to put it in writing, which I did. And he read it. It took a few weeks to read it. Then he says basically that he thinks that the reason that we needed to develop an open heart program. Now, so the next thing I did was to meet with the head of cardiovascular surgery, who was my colleague, former colleague, and he also agreed to see if he could help us develop an open heart program in Barbados. I invited him down to Barbados to see the facilities and to meet the minister. I went with him, and we met with Minister Tate along with Dr. LaCour, and we came to an unofficial agreement that we would try to develop a cardiac program, open heart surgical program in Barbados. What was interesting also, and Jeff Massey, so you will remember this was in 1988. Jeff was in England at the time, and I met Dr. Massey at the ACC conference in Anaheim, in California. And Jeff was having an opportunity in England, thinking about going back to Antigua. And I tried to encourage Jeff to come back to Barbados because I was pretty sure that we were going to develop an invasive cardiology and cardiac surgical program. So with this encouragement, I resigned my job in New York, and I came back to Barbados in 1988 on a handshake with the intention of developing an invasive cardiology and cardiac surgical program. At the same time, the Heart Foundation of Barbados funded a study by Professor Warren on doing a feasibility study of developing open heart surgery in Barbados. It was positive. Prof. Warren said we had a new surgical ICU, we had an OR, our blood bank can do it, and we had a lab that can do it. Then we had to put everything in place. The minister, Prof. Warren, and myself, we went back up to New York. Many administrators and trustees at North Shore. An agreement was made that they would help us develop a cardiac surgical program at the QEH. They would train our personnel and send a team at the startup of our cardiac surgical program. Next slide, please. So here is on the right, when Dr. Tortolani here and Dr. Corhill, Mr. Tate had a luncheon at the Hilton. Included here is Hospital Director James Williams. Trevor Hassett is here. Mr. DeCurie from Life of Barbados. So we put together not only our QEH faculty government, but we got the private sector involved. We invited Dr. Bratt from Trinidad and Dr. Ballantyne, Sir Fred Ballantyne, himself a cardiologist from St. Vincent. And then Dr. LaCourte and Dr. Tortolani brought down this portable echo machine from Breakfast Club. And this presentation was made at the Hilton there. Next slide, please. So, we were all set to go. Now we needed to get the personnel to do it. The most important person was a cardiac surgeon. We needed a cardiac surgeon who had the aptitude and skills. Also, we needed a general surgeon with the aptitude and skills to become a cardiac surgeon. And there we went back to Professor Warren. Professor Warren was a senior surgeon at the time, a professor at the university, and the person he picked was Mr. Anthony Harris. Mr. Harris had just come back from England, where he had done his FRCS. Mr. Harris then had to do his exams because you have to pass certain exams for practicing states. And then Mr. Harris was given the task of selecting his team. He picked out Mike from Korea as anesthesiologist, perfusers with Stephanie Bryan, then he picked 4 ICU and Cath Lab nurses, ICU nurses, and I picked the Cath Lab nurses along with Dr. Massey and the cardiac technician to be trained at North Shore. Mr. Harris went off in January of 1991, and he was there for 2.5 years. The anesthetists and perfusers spent 1 year, but they started in 92. We all did our training around the same time to finish around summer of 1993. Dr. Massey and I also went back off. Remember, Dr. Massey and I came back to Barbados in 1988. At that time, that old Cath Lab that we were using was extinct. And we had not been in the Cath Lab for 5 years. I went back up in North Shore and spent about, 4 to 6 weeks. And Dr. Massey went back up to England, where we honed our skills again. The government of Barbados purchased a cardiac catheterization lab. We had a surgical ICU in place, but we needed equipment. We needed a heart-lung machine, we needed a sound saver, we needed an echo machine, and so on. So we needed things to get this program going. With permission from the Ministry of Health, we approached the private sector for donations. And surprising for us, we raised $1.2 million. I must say that the people of Barbados were really very much, were very resourceful and helpful to us. Later on, a few years down the road, when we were trying to establish a pediatric cardiac center, registered international, equipped the pediatric ICU. Next slide. These were some of the companies that gave us money. Barbados Mutual, Now Surgical, Life of Barbados, and ICBL together gave us $100,000. We got money from the Barbados Turf Club, Lotto, Barbados Electronic Communication, that is now Cable and Wireless. And we got money from a lot of the companies in Barbados, as well as small groups of the Syrian Lebanese Association and the Curious League of Friends. The Curious League of Friends, of which my mother was a part of it, ran the canteen in those days. So whenever they got any kind of excess money, I think the League of Friends paid for one of our nurses to go overseas and train. Next slide, please. And this is just cut from the newspaper. It showed BET presenting the check, and Steve Sunk from, at that time, he was with, I say, Barbados Mutual, giving us a check for over $30,000. Next slide, please. So this was now 1993. All of our people were back. Mr. Harris was back, Dr. Corey was back, Dr. Massey, everybody was back. We needed to get this program going. Now, traditionally, surgeons, cardiac surgeons come out to the Department of Surgery, cardiologists come out to the Department of Medicine or Pediatrics, and cardiac and anesthetists come out to the Department of Anesthesia. However, we were getting a little bit of pushback from the department, so we figured it out. We sat down, Mr. Harris, Dr. Corey, myself, and Dr. Massey, and we figured that the best way for us to do this was to create our own department. We got a lot of pushback and a lot of problems from the other department, who they think they are, et cetera, et cetera. You understand how it is. But we were able to convince the minister that we actually wanted our own department to be able to do this. And he granted us our own department, and Department of Invasive Cardiology and Cardiac Surgery started in December of 1993. And those were the people who were in our department. The first cardiac catheterization was done on the 9th of December 1993, and the first open heart surgery was done in May 1994. A team of from New York came down, Dr. Tortolani himself, Dr. Parnell, OR nurses, cardiac anesthesiologists, and a perfusionist came. So they were with us for about a week as we started up our own program. Next slide. This is a team just before we left. This is a part of the team just before we left New York to return to Barbados in June of '93. Dr. Tortolani, who trained Mr. Harris, Stephanie Bernadette, who were nurses. Stephanie was the perfusionist, and I was up there doing my retraining. Next slide, please. And this is the opening of the Cath Lab, and that with me is this was our new Cath Lab that we were opening, and that is Dr. Ron Henry. Dr. Ron Henry in Trinidad, who was doing the same thing as we were doing. He was opening a Cath Lab in South Carolina, Trinidad, but we were doing it in the private, in a public setting, and he was doing it in the private setting. Next slide. And this is the first open heart surgery. This is Dr. Corey preparing himself for the first open heart. There's Mr. Harris here, and here, Dr. Myers, the anesthesiologist, and Dr. Parnell, one of our nurses. Patients on the table there, and this is during our first operation here. Next slide, please. And this little girl here, Carrie Ann Covington, was our first open heart patient. She was 8 years old. She had a moderate size superior ST, and our second patient was went with the subaortic membrane. And this is on day 1 after the operation. This is the first day after the operation. So we started off doing very well. We started off very smoothly. Next slide, please. And this is our team, not at the start. This is our team, I think, at Independence of 1994 year. There was a blurb in the paper about us. By that time, Dr. Stephen Moore had joined us. And this was the invasive cardiology and cardiac surgical team. Next slide, please. Now, our program did very well for several years. Patients with stable chronic conditions did very well. We operated on older children in ASTs, PDAs, and court patients. And if we had children with complex congenital disease, tetralogy fallow, transposition, and so on, those children were sent overseas for surgery. But not only did our department improved the care of patients with heart surgery, but it improved the care of the whole hospital. The modern being, if you can look after anybody after heart surgery, you can look after anybody, because heart surgery after heart surgery are the most sick patients of all. So MIs were better managed, strokes were better managed, trauma, stab wounds, gunshot wounds, non-cardiac surgery, and sepsis. We also had patients with, we also managed patients with arrhythmias. Dr. Massey had started the Placemaker Program and so on. But what was most important also is that we were financially viable. We brought money into the hospital and we were self-sufficient. We had our own little financial area in the administrative area of the 2 years, that we could see how much money we brought in, how much money we were sending out. And actually, Tony Harris and I worked out every 4 private patients that we did, and we were getting private patients with insurance, would cover the cost of 1 hospital patient. So we were not really costing the hospital a lot of money. Next slide, please. And later on, we also, about 94, we started about 97, we made a push in 97, 98 to develop, to make QEH have a pediatric cardiology surgery in the region. We got Varieties Club on board. This lady here is Lady Cheryl Ford. She was the president of Varieties at the time, and they really helped us. This is a girl who had heart surgery. This is another baby. We had brought down a team from Norfolk, pediatric over heart team. This is a little baby. This is the youngest baby that we had. So it was all encompassing, and we had a lot of support from the Barbadian population. Next slide. Now, not only were we doing work, but we were academic. We made sure that we presented our scientific papers. And you can see here, we started off, all of our work was presented at the Caribbean Cardiology Conference. I presented where we started. Mr. Harris presented surgical experience. Mr. Harris also presented again. There were about 2 or 3 other papers, which I couldn't get all on the slide. Dr. Solan Benjamin and I presented congenital heart disease in Barbados, proposals for fluid management in the region. And the plan was Dr. Benjamin was to go off and do critical care pediatric, which she did, and actually did come back to Barbados with the intention of us doing that. But our pediatric cardiac program really never materialized. Of note here is this is the last paper that I presented from the department, and this was 10 years after that. This was in 2009. By that time, we had started to develop some challenges and so on. And we actually will talk about that in a short while. Next slide, please. So let's just look at the stuff that we actually present. And the reason for showing this slide here was to show what we were doing, except for 1 year when the Cath Lab.
Yeah, I got, yeah. And then press enter.
We were doing over 100 Caths every year. And notice from about 1993, the Cath number started to drop. A Cath Lab is like a car. You have 10 years or whatever time, and after that, the Cath Lab starts to fall apart. We need a new one. From about 1996, I started to ask for new Cath Lab and ask for new stuff, which really did not come. Next slide, please. And here I'm about open heart surgical numbers between 1994 and 2008. We had done 767 patients with a surgical mortality of 4.9%. Next slide. Mr. Harris did all types of surgery, mainly coronary artery bypass surgery, but we did a lot of valve procedures and we did a lot of congenital heart disease. And remember at that time, we had older children with VSDs and ASDs, and we had young adults in their 20s, because remember there was a big backlog because none of these patients had had surgery before. Miscellaneous is a conglomerate of things, including aortic dissections and so on. Next slide, please. And we were open to the region. Next slide, please. And as you can see here from the slide, not only were we doing patients from Barbados, some patients, there were over 120 people from the region. St. Vincent, Guyana, Antigua, St. Lucia, Trinidad, Guyana, and over here we get a few from Jamaica, Dominica, a couple of people from England, Nevis. So we even got somebody from Haiti, somebody from Belize. And we had 2 visitors who were in Barbados. They had their problems here, and they were happy to be operated on in Barbados. Next slide, please. No, we also at that time started a pacemaker program. Pacemaker program was started through the Rotary Club and the HBO, and started actually by Frank Ramsey and Trevor Hassel as its founders. The first pacemaker was inserted by Dr. Barbados in 1988, and then once Jeff Massey came back in 1988, he took over the directorship of the pacemaker program, and he's run it ever since then, later joined by Stephen Moore. And today, from the time we started to, I think, 2019, we have had 328 pacemakers inserted at Create. Next slide. Now, this is now more modern. I was still a member of the department. And Scantlebury came back in 2015. And so I have included Scantlebury in my sojourn at the QEH. She was, Scantlebury actually was a senior registrar in the department before she left to go away and study in the US. So she came back as an interventional cardiologist in 2015. She started her PCI program in 2016, and between 2016 and 2019, she did 125 cases. And I think over the next 2 years, I think she did another 60 or 70 patients. Right? And as we have always said in the department, she published what she did. It is important that you publish what you do. It is important that people know what you're doing and that your results are out there. Next slide, please. So, in my sojourn at the QEH, as you know, most people know, I retired in 2019. This is how I left the department. I started the department in 1993, was its first head for 10 years. And after 26 years, I left in 2019. We had almost 2,500 class, 328 pacemakers, 1,300 surgery, 125 PCIs, and I sent 260 children with complex heart disease overseas to have surgery. Next slide, please. Now, let's look at what was happening in the region, because I've avoided the region in this. We were actually the envy of the region in the late 90s, early 2000s. We were doing high-end cardiac surgery in a public hospital, and all Barbadians having access to state-of-the-art care. And we were a major referral center in the region. There were similar programs in Trinidad and in the Bahamas, but they were in private hospitals, and private and public patients needed to pay. The government either had to sponsor them or not. But what we did is that we did it in the public sector. And in fact, except probably for Guyana, we are still the only hospital, we're the only public hospital in the English-speaking Caribbean that has a cardiac catheterization and open heart program. There are 6 or 7 Cath Labs in Trinidad doing a lot of angioplasty. They're all in the private sector. In Jamaica also, although they are doing some angioplasty at the University Hospital, they're just coming to Cath Lab. Next slide, please. So, by the early 2000s, our equipment started to get old and malfunction without proper maintenance. There was excessive downtime in the Cath Lab. We got little support from the administration, and there were inadequate numbers of critical care beds. So that when we had sick patients, we wanted to cath people, they were doing open heart surgery. We had to postpone the open heart surgery because the SSU beds were full. What started to happen because we were treating people better, people with strokes, people with gunshot wounds and stab wounds that would have died before because of our presence were not there and taking up the beds. We needed an expansion, and we needed many expansions, and we need to make it into a regional program. Next slide, please. So what then started to happen is that, well, not really started to happen, but I, as head of the department, I was given reports every year or every 2 to 5 years of what we were doing and making recommendations for what needed to update that. There were proposals made for the utilization of the Lions IQ Center to make it into a program because that we could expand ourselves and really make ourselves into a bigger program. I wrote this proposal in 1996, and this was followed up by the preparation made from from Mr. Harris, but also from Professor Hassan at the Harvard Mission Barbados. And we made a proposal that the development of cardiovascular services in Barbados, a proposal to enhance preventative, diagnostic, curative cardiac services from 2000 to 2010. This paper was sent in to the ministry in 1999. Next slide, please. And this is what we were asking for. It's a Lions IQ Center. It really wasn't being used. This is where the ophthalmology department are. There was an empty shell here. And this is what we were asking for, to make our own department in there and to expand. Next slide, please. It was initiated to the Ministry of Health, then to the European Union in association with the Heart Foundation, and it was approved by the European Union. Next slide. The European Union was to provide $10 million US, and that was to buy a new Cath Lab and to provide it with all the special equipment that we needed, and also to provide doctors' offices and so on there. Jeff Massey often reminds me that we actually we were thinking that if we were to get that and that we would close our private offices outside and bring our office into the QEH, because it is better for us to be in the QEH now, because if there's any issues, we are always there. And you know, and that is how it was. When I practiced at North Shore and I practiced at Brookvale, my office was in the hospital where I saw private patients also. And that's actually the best way to actually do it. Next slide, please. Now, the government was supposed to provide space. We had already identified the space. Plans, we are already had plans. Mr. Harris and I went to our architect and we had the plans drawn up and delivered. There, what all the administration had to do was the building of the facility, missionary cabinetry and stuff. It was an entire floor. It already had a roof, floor, and siding. So all they needed was to do the plumbing and stuff. And the Heart Foundation part of the deal is that they would provide cardiac rehabilitation services for patients that needed it. Next slide. The EU dispensed their funds in 2002. The building and installation of the equipment didn't start till about 2012, and it took 12 years to complete. We're coming. It was officially opened in 2014. It was officially opened in 2014 with additional funds from SAP. But it's really not fully open.
I think we should start normalizing to ensure that person.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. It was not, and it's not fully open. Okay, let me start from the beginning. The dispense of funds in 2002, it was not completely open until 2014, but really not completely open. The Cath Lab is open. The 14-bedded cardiac intensive care unit is still not open. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here is the Cath Lab, right? Next slide. And this is a cardiac care ward, state-of-the-art monitors, fancy beds, 14 beds unused. Next slide, please. Now, with the slow development of services at QEHs, right, and with an increasing incidence of coronary artery disease, it was fairly obvious that cardiology services, both non-invasive and invasive, had to develop in the private sector. A cardiac cath lab is the heart of a cardiology department. That is where we do high-end cardiology. That is where, that is a gold standard. That is where, if we're not exactly sure what is going on, we pass catheters from the leg or the arm up in the heart, we measure pressures, and not only do we do that, that is where we also do interventions, close holes in the hearts and so on. So it is important that you have a cath lab. A high-end cardiology department cannot run without a cath lab. Next slide, please. So in 2005, when we saw the spiraling down of the cath lab at the QEH and not being able to practice our craft in the way that we wanted to, Dr. Massey and I decided that we would do it in the private sector. We went out and we bought a portable cath lab and put it in a private hospital. We put it at Bayview. We put it at Bayview in a third operating room that wasn't being used, and we used there, and we had it there between 2005 and 2008. Now, we were very fortunate in 2008, an interventional radiologist, Dr. O'Keller Ward, who actually was a senior house officer in the Department of Invasive Cardiology and Cardiac Surgery early before he went off the stage. He came back, he was here on holiday. I told him what we were interested in doing, and he was interested in coming home, packed his family up, and he came home. And we made an investment in developing a private medical center, and our cath lab was transformed to this private standalone lab. We had 5 recovery beds, we have a 64-slice CT scan, medical offices, non-invasive, full non-invasive ECG, echo, all the stuff that we need, including CT coronary angiography. We had an internist working with us. We have an anesthetic group, CPSI. We had 2 cardiovascular techs, and we have 5 RN nurses. Next slide, please. This is great risk. Next slide, please. This is the portable lab. In the beginning, we could not afford a state-of-the-art lab, but this did what we needed. We were able to accurately diagnose people with coronary artery disease, and our cath learns from that. And not only refer patients down to Trinidad, but we also send patients to North America on this lab. Next slide, please. And in 2015, we were able then to develop a state-of-the-art lab. This is a flat plate state-of-the-art lab that is very similar to one at the QEH. Next slide, please. So here's the diagnostic stuff that we did. We virtually do everything there. We do cath, we do intervention, we do pacemakers and so on. Next slide. We also, I developed an interventional program for congenital heart disease with Dr. Theo from the University of Florida in Jacksonville. And I had met him through Dr. Solange Benjamin. When Dr. Benjamin had come back, she was here for 2 years, and she left, and she went back to the States. She went to work with Dr. Theo. So I developed a relationship with him. So remember, I was still in the QEH then, running the pediatric cardiac clinic. There was no cath lab at the QEH then. So we were able to do not only private patients, but I was also able to bring over patients from indigent patients from the cardiology clinic. They were paid for either due to the government medical aid scheme or by Varieties Club. Next slide, please. So between 2009 and 2020, we have done 32 procedures, age 3 to 65 with no mortality and minimum morbidity. Next slide. And here is a blurb in one of the newspapers when we did five children in 2 days. Next slide, please. Now, we also started PCI. Before Dr. Sclandenberry came back, Dr. Massey and I are not interventional cardiologists, we are invasive cardiologists. So we do the class, but we're not trained with intervention. So when we were doing a class, we used to send our patients down to Dr. Henry and train that. Once we got a new Cath Lab, Dr. Henry then started to come up and work with us. Dr. Sclandenberry joined us in 2016, Dr. Lugo joined us in 2020. So by the time we started intervention in 2015 to now, we have done 61 patients have had PCI with no mortality and minimum morbidity. Next slide, please. Dr. Massey, the pacemaker man, he also developed pacemaker program at Bracebridge. And we also got help from Dr. Trevor Green, Barbadian electrophysiologist, a Baptist. He came, so he's come down, set up an EP ablation stuff at Bracebridge. And so, next slide, please. So at this time, here's what we've done from 2008 to 2000. We have done almost 1,000 casts. We have done congenital intervention, 32 patients, 61 PCIs, 156 pacemakers, 5 IV patients, and 2 EPs. We would have done a lot more EPs by the patient, but since the onset of COVID, Dr. Green has not come out since then because of the COVID epidemic. Next slide, please. And as we've always had, we stay academic. We have published our stuff out of Bracebridge. We suffered our CT stuff, and I presented what we had done, both in terms of developing our program in a private stuff as well. Right? So I think it's important that you publish what you have done. You be transparent. Next slide, please. Now, I should also add here, because this is a presentation of the development of cardiac program.
That's all you see?
In Barbados. So I just want to state here that there's also another private lab or another private study in Barbados, but I have no statistics for that, for fairness. Next slide. So in summary, what is the state of cardiology in Barbados in 2021? Children. There have been a significant decrease in the birth rate in Barbados in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the stats, we used to have about 4,100, 1,200 deliveries in Barbados when I first came back in 1980. Cheryl Alexis and I, when she was my registrar, had worked on the incidence for congenital heart disease, which was very similar to the rest of the world. By the year 2000, they were down to 3,500. And by nowadays, our birth rate, we only have 2,300 deliveries in Barbados. So it has basically halved in 40 years. So, and this reflects what is happening to our society. More and more women are working, women are professional women, and rather than having 4, 5, 6 children pass, women are either having 1 or 2. And this is not only in professional women, this is women across the board. Because as you can see out there, women are not only professionals, doctors, lawyers, bankers and stuff, they're also pumping gas to work at gas station, they're tailors, they're painters and so on. So because of this decrease in the birth rate, there has a significant decrease in children born with congenital heart disease. So what has happened, and I actually first noticed this about 10 years ago, because in my first few years, so I used to have about 4 or 5 children born every year that I needed to transport out. We would have a junior doctor go with them, we put them IV, we put them on a plane, and they would go either to New York or to Jacksonville. In the last 10 or so years, 10 years, I started to notice that there was a dwindling of that. Not seeing a lot of patients, a lot of children born with congenital heart disease. And actually I had a conversation with Clyde Cave and Dr. J.M. Birchwood, our neonatologist, just yesterday when I was looking up the stats. And they said that they really have not in the last 2 or 3 years, they have not had any significant newborn that they've had to transfer out since I left the service almost 2 years ago. So there's really no, and because of that, we were able to take care of the backlog. We used to have a backlog of patients who had holes in the heart and now but they were doing good. Those patients who were doing good always got put on the back burner. Suppose they were ready to go away and they couldn't be done here. A newborn baby was born and had to go and they would get pushed back. We were able to take away that. So there are now very few children who are actually, I'm no longer there. But I understand that we don't have a big waiting list. There's no rheumatic fever, hence no new rheumatic heart disease. And we have interventional procedures available in both public and the private sectors. Next slide, please. When the Open Heart program, or when the program in North Shore ended in 2005, I developed a similar program with the Wilson Children's Hospital in Jacksonville, again with the help of Sir Lance Benjamin, and at a subsidized cost of $25,000. Regular cost for open heart surgery now in the US has gone up from $40,000 to $50,000, which it was before, now to $70,000 to $80,000. We pay a round fee of $25,000. Since then, since 2008, we've had 60 children that we have gone and had surgery there with one death. Now, remember early on, I used to do the consultations in the OACS countries with a portable echo machine. Once we started our Open Heart program in 2019, I wasn't able to do it anymore. I got busy looking after post-op patients and so on. That has been taken over by World Pediatric Project. It's headquartered in Virginia, and we know pediatric cardiologists. I think they've stopped since COVID. That pediatric cardiologists from the USA who go to the islands once or twice a year and do with a portable echo, they do clinics and refer patients to pediatric hospitals in the US. What we really do need here, though, in the Caribbean is a regional pediatric cardiac center to serve the needs of the region. So from Guyana in the north, in the south, up to Antigua St. Kitts in the north, that population is about 3 million people. You need a pediatric cardiac center for 3 million people. Right? I had wanted it to be here in Barbados. We never been able to achieve that. I think the best place for it is actually in Trinidad. Trinidad has 1.2 million people. Guyana has 800,000. Barbados and the OACS has another million people. It would be best to be sited in Trinidad. Whether it will happen or not, it is left to be seen. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, adults in the adult world, because, although I started off as a pediatric cardiologist, I realized when I first came back here, and so the reason I did pediatrics very early is that's what I saw when I was a medical student at those were that was all of the cardiology I saw at Mona, and most of the cardiology I saw here when I was a medical student. But when I was training at Brookdale, I was fortunate that I shared with both the pediatrics and the adults shared the Cath Lab. So I had a 1-year training. When I was there for 18 months, I was able to do adults and so on stuff. So I learned to Cath and all that. And it's very easy for a pediatric cardiologist to do adult cardiology, not vice versa. If I could Cath a 2.5 kilo baby with a trouser fellow, I think after 70 kilo man with coronary disease. So I've spent, although I've spent majority of the time doing adults, most of, we actually have a pretty good adult treatment here in Barbados for chronic cardiac problems. If you have heart failure, you have hypertension, we have adequate amount of antihypertensive drugs, we have heart failure drugs, we have all the anti-arrhythmic drugs available. We have non-invasive tests, CT, echo, everything in both the private and the public sector. We have cardiac cath and angiography and PCI in the public and private sector. We have pacemaker implantation in the public and private sector. We have surgery for congenital valve and coronary bypass grafting, etc. in the public sector, although the waiting periods may be long. What are the things that we need to change going forward? We need our public cardiac clinics are overburdened and waiting periods are long. We need more cardiologists, more house staff, and more nursing staff. We have no adequate treatment at this time for patients with acute myocardial infarction. We need to develop a STEMI network. And actually, I was going to talk about this continuation today, but I think when I looked at everything, that was, it really was too much of it, too long. We need to develop a STEMI network to bring the mortality from acute MI to respectable numbers here in Barbados. The cardiology wing at the QVH needs to be staffed and open. And we need to develop a cardiac emergency room chest clinic needs to be established in the private sector, and this is something that we are working on. Next slide. I think that's it. Well, that's it. I have given you an overview of the development of cardiac services here in Barbados and indeed the region. I think we have done we have done well. We could have done a lot better with more support. And although I'm still in the trenches, I think we have to leave it now to the younger cardiologists who are coming up to try to take it to the next level. And I would like to thank the Heart Foundation for inviting me here to share my journey in the development of cardiac services in Barbados and in the region. Thank you very much.
For that whirlwind tour of the development of cardiac services in the entire region. It's always so difficult to get so much that has been done in a short space of time allocated, because to truly catalog what has been done would obviously take more than one presentation, probably a series of presentations to cover so much that has been done. I thank you very much, and I thought it was a great idea for the Heart Foundation to have somebody who's been there from the initiation up to now, so that the youngsters who come along would see the broad shoulders that they stand on as they take the services further. I shall now hand over to Dr. Don Scantlebury, who would handle the question and answer session. Dr. Don Scantlebury, as you heard in the presentation, is the person who has established interventional cardiology in the public sector and is taking that forward. But she wears another cap, and that's as the medical director of Rehabilitation, which is the Cinderella, as far as I'm concerned, the Cinderella of cardiac services, a much needed service, but somehow it doesn't seem to be taken up by the people who should be doing that. So I'll hand it over to Don for Don to handle the question and answer aspect. Don?
Hello, is that okay? Good. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Ishmael for that wonderful journey through our last 30 years of cardiology history in Barbados. I am actually going to start off with a question. Actually, no, because there's someone that has their hand up. That's Dr. Connell. So I am going to ask him to start off our questions, and then I will move on. Can you allow Dr. Connell to unmute?
Thank you, Dr. Scantlebury, and thank you, Dr. Ishmael, for an awesome tour de force of the history of development of cardiovascular disease in Barbados. I have to admit, I tuned out briefly for about 2 minutes, and when I returned and I heard you saying, we have no echo, we have limited resources, I thought that you were almost at the end of your presentation and you were speaking about what was happening now, only to realize you were speaking about back then. But there seem to be 4 ingredients of a successful program, okay? A burning platform, so you have the cardiovascular disease burden, right? You need champions, you kind of need people to push this, the cardiologists and the cardiac surgeons. Obviously you need money, and then you need innovation and innovative thought. I guess this is where academia comes into it. My question is not about academia at all. My question is, how much do you think the money part of it has been fractured or affected by the public-private partnerships, whether it's the fact that we don't have private cardiology services at the hospital, or we no longer have this entire list of private funders? Do you think that that has been a problem in where we are currently? And the second part of the question is, because I recognize you mentioned these kind of small island developing states having centers of excellence and also having these kind of pooling resources because we have limited resources. Do you think that then that's a question then to be advanced at the level of CARICOM so that we have this pooling of resources at a regional level? And thank you for an excellent presentation.
Can I just give you your first question again? I think you had 2 questions here.
So my first question was about money, public-private partnerships. This is obviously this has been a failure, I would say. And and you mentioned 2 examples. One was the fact that you tried, you struggled. So there's no, I want to say, a forced dichotomy into private care and public care. You're not at the hospital in private care. But secondly, I noticed from your list of all of these private companies who really were seminal in helping you to start up, but are probably not more involved now because it's almost 100% government funding or not funding. So what are your comments on that?
Well, I think that we needed the private funding in the beginning, and I think that we had at this stage everybody was very enthusiastic. We had a very enthusiastic team. We had a minister that was very enthusiastic to get this going. So therefore, we got permission because I just wasn't going to go to the private sector and ask for money for the QH. I had to get permission from the minister. So I mean, it was wonderful. I often thought that when things started to go bad, well, I know bad is the right word, when things started to slide down a bit in the 2000s, I was thinking about going back to the private sector again. And asking. I did not have the kind of relationship with the minister of the time to be able to go and do that. I think, and my personal opinion is that if you're going to do anything high-end in a government institution, you have to get the buy-in of the politicians. Politicians, the minister needs to buy in. It needs to be a top-down. You can't try to build a cardiac program from the bottom up, if you see what I mean. So if you're going to do anything high-end, you need to talk to the people at top. The people at top need to buy into it, and then you would actually get better. It has actually turned out, in the beginning, actually, it was quite easy. It was really very, very, very easy to do it. And the Life from Barbados, Sagicor, Getty's Grant, Lotto, we just went to them and said, here, look, we wanted to start a cardiac program in Barbados. We have people who are training. Here's what we need. We need this, we need that, we need that, we need that. And it cost that. And, or I don't know if it was a surprise, but we got it. And we were able to go on from that. I am not quite sure what happened to us in the 2000s. I thought that we had done a wonderful job. I think that we were brain patients for the islands, and we were not cost a lot of money because, as I said, we were cost effective, because not only were we doing public patients, we were doing private patients. We were doing private patients, not only surgery, we were doing private patients catheterization. So when patients had to be cathed in the QEH, they were paying, and people come in the QEH for echoes and halters and stuff were paying. So cardiology departments in the real world get stuff done. Why they get stuff? Because a lot of people with heart disease, and if you have a lot of people with heart disease, hospitals are going to do well with it. Hospitals do well off of cardiology, cardiac surgery, gastroenterology, stuff like that, procedures. And they don't make money from psychiatry, pediatrics, and so on. So when you have an organization, make money from orthopedics and so on, you need to build those organizations, and then they can help the other organizations that are not big money earners. I hope I answered your question, partly.
Thanks, Dr. Ishmael. For our next question, I'll ask Professor Errol Warren to, I see that he has his hand up. So if you can let him unmute so that he can ask his question.
Richard, thank you very much for an excellent tour de force. There are 2 points I want to make. One of the things that I realized in doing the feasibility study for the open heart surgery program was that with the changing demographics and the changing disease pattern in Barbados, that we needed to make the program a regional program, even if it were only the region of the Eastern Caribbean. And I'm not sure that sufficient attention was paid to that point in keeping it going. The other point you made about the support of the politicians is very well made. Of course, you have the other point in that, because when politicians change, if you have what I will call a pathological aversion to what the other one was doing, you might find yourself and the programs in difficulty. And that you may want to ponder about, because what may have happened in certain circumstances. Again, thank you very much for your tour de force.
Professor, I agree with you. I did not want to. That is a little difficult to say, you know, politically wise, but your point is very well taken. Very, very, very well taken when there's a...
I got there.
Take off all down my friend.
Or so.
Okay, Ishmael, you're muted.
Okay, I am on mute. I'm trying to unmute. Mickey, I think that your point is very well taken, and I 100% agree with you with that last point. It is difficult to say you don't want to pay things down, but you have a program that is going exceptionally well. original program, brain patients from all over. Why would you allow it to fall apart? Didn't make sense.
On that political point, you may not, I don't know if you may not have realized that that whole training program was almost stopped. And I had to make an intervention to make sure that Dr. Tricori and the perfusionists could go up. It was decided that this was not necessary. This would be a waste of money. Yes, that's what happened.
Yeah. I understand that.
Galaxy Tab with S Pen. Somebody has their hand up. I'm not quite sure who the person is. If you can identify yourself when you speak. While they wait to unmute, I'm going to read a comment that Dr. Massey placed in the chat. He had a private patient who won recognition that the cardiac surgery he had at the Mayo Clinic was being done locally. He anonymously donated $10,000 annually until his death. Is there a role for philanthropic services at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital now? Is there?
Yes, I think that there is, but I get back to my same point again. It has to come from the top. It basically needs to come from the top, and the minister and stuff, they have to buy into it and allow it. That's just how it is. Everything that we were able to do is because we were able to get the permanent secretary or the minister to buy in to get things done.
Yep.
If I may,
yeah.
If I may make an observation on that, and it ties in with the previous remark about you made the observation of your being in the Lions Eye Care Center. What you haven't mentioned is that the Lions Eye Care Center, of course, was a philanthropic donation to the QEH, that it was opened as an eye care center. And then on a change of government, it was closed down.
Yes, very much so. I remember that well. It was supposed to be this big eye care center that would take care of not only people in Barbados, but in the region. Right? And then there was a government change and it petered out.
I sit here shaking my head at this wealth of history contained in this virtual chat room. I'm going to look up and call on someone else. Jonathan Daniel, you have a question? Unmute yourself. There we go.
All right. So hi, this is that's my first name, but this is Romel Daniel.
Hi. So
actually, I don't have a question. I just have a comment, and that is that thanks, Richard, for the and the association for this excellent presentation. And from someone from the small islands, from the Caribbean, from St. Lucia. I just really want to thank you for the immense amount of work that you did, not only before I graduated and became a cardiologist, but subsequent to that, when you were coming down. Sometimes, as I said, on your own, in fact, most times on your own, you would come down and help us with cardiac cases before World Pediatric Project really took off. And I just think that this is an excellent time to say, you're a Caribbean man. I just want to thank you for the immense amount of work that you've done. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rommel. I really used to enjoy coming down. Rommel, I worked with Rommel many times. I used to go down, Rommel would organize a clinic, and we would work. It was very interesting. Those were wonderful times. They were my best of times when I would go to the islands, do the work, and then in the early days of starting up. I never got paid for anything. I would get an airline ticket, not all the time. And if I stayed over, I would get hotel accommodation and food, breakfast and dinner. It was never for any pay. It was what I wanted to do. And I actually enjoyed it. And actually, it was unbelievable because I used to see some cases that I'd never seen before. I remember seeing vegetations on valves. Don and Mike, Don and Jeffrey understand that on aortic valves flapping and stuff, things that it was wonderful. And I actually enjoyed working in solution. I used to work with Rommel, Bert Braffett when he was there, and Jackie Bird and Joe Simmons.
Another question. One of the difficulties of establishing a well-rounded Cath Lab at both the hospital and in private, wherever you are, is lack of nursing staff. And one of the question is whether there's interest in formulating a cardiac program in Barbados for registered nurses who are interested in specializing in cardiology. And I'll expand that to establishing a program for technicians and nurses and whatever else, other ancillary staff that are so necessary. Is there any thought of this?
That is at me. I think it's a wonderful idea, Dawn. Our problem is nursing staff. What I was told is that the reason that the cardiology really line at Care 7 never opened is that we didn't have adequately trained nurses. I was also told that we have a 12-bedded medical ICU, and the only reason that we only have 6 beds open, and that's right, 6 beds, is because we don't have adequately trained nurses. So anything that we can get nurses trained up to a high-end level would be most welcome. I think one of the things that I don't know if this still exists, but I remember during our days, Jeff Massey and I used to talk about that, is that we would have a well-trained ICU nurse or Cath Lab nurse or whatever is working with us. They had all the skills, and they would get moved. They would get moved from nursing office. Nurse's office would send them to B7 or would send them to obstetrics. And we could never understand that because it takes a while to train up a nurse in a particular specialty. So why would nursing office think of moving them? No, if the nurses said they want to move, that's one story. But many nurses did not want to move. They just got moved. Remember that, Jeff?
Still happens.
I remember that very well. And I think that's one of the weaknesses of the QH and of our systems, that they don't realize that these subspecialties are a pyramid. You've got like the Don Scantleberries or the Richard Ishmaels, but you've got to have this big supporting staff to help. So you can't go anywhere without first realizing what is a human resource requirement and working towards that. Because if you have the nursing staff, then that area in the Lions Eye Care Center could be open 24 hours, and you can get your chest pain clinic, and people come with chest pain come straight upstairs and work. But if you don't have the nursing input, the encouragement from the nursing services to send you people who you train and who they allow them to stay with you, we're not going to ever get any further.
Adrian, is that Dr. Lord?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I hope you don't mind me shifting gears a little bit here. I'm actually from the climate community. Yes, some of you might be wondering why someone from climate might be involved in in such a discussion or be interested in such a discussion, but we've been embarking on a program across the region with other climatologists, meteorologists from the region, the Caribbean Public Health Agency as well. And we're looking at the links between weather and climate and various illnesses, from dengue to, in this case, cardiac concerns, whether it be more along the lines of morbidity or even mortality. But my particular interest in raising this here is as we go through this increasing variability in climate, heat and heat stress, we believe, will become more of an issue. And of course, heat stress has its links with cardiac concerns. So one of the issues we have in embarking on such research is the availability of data and being able to link, build the relationships between climate and heat-related illnesses, including cardiac-related illnesses. But what I wanted to know from the speaker and the colleagues, is this, do you see this as a concern now, or because of increasing temperatures as we move through the next few decades? And if so, then we will have to prepare a population for that. Do you see this as an increasing concern when it comes to cardiac related illnesses and morbidity across the region? I know I'm shifting gears a bit.
Dr. Ishmael.
Yeah.
Jeff looks as though he wants to take this. I'll let Jeff take this.
I was just going to say that, you give way to the speaker first, and I would stand at first or second slip and take it afterwards. Because Adrian, we the cardiologists do realize the contribution of not only climate but air pollution and now increasingly noise pollution to heart disease. And this ties in nicely to the point that was just made about lack of resources. You can't expect Don Scantlebury to be hanging around 24 hours a day to do the primary PCI and then to find the time to go and crunch the numbers and produce the data. What has never been realized in our setting is the need for people to crunch the data and support staff in every department to be able to catalog what you do, see how well you're doing it, and therefore produce that data. So we do not have any data, although we have clear recognition that climate contributes to heart disease. Yes, strokes and heart attacks are more common in the colder times of the year than in the warmer times of the year, etc. And now noise pollution. But unfortunately, you may be fortunate in the climate group to have people to put together the data, but unfortunately we don't have that. So again, congratulations to Dr. Ishmael, because every time you see a paper presented, it's X amount of extra hours of sleep lost at night coming to put together the numbers to present this paper and then getting to work for 8 o'clock the next morning to do the work that needs to be done. So that's the other recognition I think we need to have, is we need to have number crunchers and people who collate this data. Because my mantra is it's not that developed societies have research centers, but that research centers make societies develop.
I'm going to take a stab at answering that question. Number one, if you're very interested in collaborations, the Barbados National Registry is would stand willing to work with you. So the BNR looks at NCDs in Barbados. One thing I hear more and more from my patients is that it was just so hot, I didn't feel like getting up to go exercise. And I'm wondering if that would end up being a significant driver of increasing NCDs in Barbados and I guess across the world as time goes by. And then of course you have to worry about, it's this vicious cycle. So, you could exercise in the air-conditioned gym, but in order to air condition the gym, you need to use electricity, and that's going to drive global warming. And, going outside is difficult because it's so hot. So, That's my thought on it. I'll
So
ask.
Dawn, I just wanted to quickly respond to that because it really does echo with me. So Adrian, I don't know your surname, but I think this is a very relevant intervention with climate change. And it's certainly where our leaders internationally, regionally, and possibly even locally are looking at the link between climate change. It's kind of like that hot bandwagon that we can jump on. And when I mentioned to Dr. Ishmael earlier, how do we advance this to the level of CARICOM? Here's a vehicle that we could use because CARICOM is centered very closely on climate change and the impact it's going to have on our region, on our finances. We can't afford to mitigate against climate change, advance the cardiovascular program, do all these things with our limited budgets. So I guess what I wanted to provoke Dr. Ishmael into saying is, if you had to say to me, Kenneth, you're having a meeting with the minister tomorrow. I'm not, by the way. And here are some things that I want you to say to convince him that this is an important program for us in 2021. There is a burning platform. In fact, it's hotter now. Cardiovascular disease will be even hotter post-COVID. We have the champions, the youngsters, as Dr. Massey has described in Don Scantlebury and the other cardiologists. We have this highly ranked university. We actually do have a nursing program that is in evolution as well, but financing is a problem. And the model we've used in the past is public-private partnerships. Do you have the political buy-in? I know I'm putting words in your mouth now, but I really want your response on this. What would you say to the minister to kind of push him the next step to say, I got to do this like how I responded to PPE and COVID?
What would you like me to tell the minister? I don't know. My plan with this talk, that if I had any more time at the end, I would have gone on and talked about what I am actively involved in now. I am very actively involved in wearing my cap as immediate past president of the Caribbean Cardiac Society and trying to get a STEMI network started in the region, right? We actually were supposed to have a Zoom conference with the ministers of health yesterday, and it got canceled at the last moment. Interestingly, when it got
Ishmael, I'll let you finish your thought, but I'm just going to point out that we are well behind time, and this is going to need to be the last statement.
Okay, so all right, so I will try and ask. I'll try and answer. The reason that it got canceled actually after Dr. Henry and I had spent hours of preparing talk was that, interestingly, the coordinator of the ministers of health was supposedly from the Bahamas. It just had an election in the Bahamas, so the new minister said he didn't know how to do it. He just come in. So he canceled the meeting. So then they asked the people from Barbados who were next on line to do it, but that didn't happen. I say this to say that when we started the STEMI network program, I wrote to CARICOM in 2017, and this whole STEMI network program, which is something that we actually need to talk about here at another time. Basically, we wrote, this came up from the NCDR, where we had a death, our mortality rate was 37%. I did not get a reply. I wrote an advocacy letter telling CARICOM that we have a 37% mortality for QMI in Barbados, and there's a good possibility that it is so in the other countries. All right, so here's what we wanted to do from the Caribbean Cardiac Society. We wanted to develop a STEMI network that when people get heart attacks, they get treated in a certain way. We did not get a reply in 2 years, not even an acknowledgement. Yeah. So what I did was you start to jog people at top, and I think that's the way to do it. I am at the age now when somebody some of the prime ministers were colleagues of mine at university or played cricket against them. So when you see them anywhere, you nudge them and say, but I don't understand. Here's what is going on. I think that unfortunately, that is how you have to get things done. You have to get them done, I think, by being able to talk to either the minister or the prime minister or whoever to get things done. And if you want to do a private public partnership thing, you have to get the minister to buy it. You ask me, what I think that we should do to get things going, somebody needs to sit down with the minister and tell the minister, here is what our mortality is for QMIs. There are people that are dying and we need to get this done. And then the minister has to decide how he wants to do it. Because we can't do it out of the QAs. I tried that already. I tried to be able to get things done, but you can't get it done bottom up.
All right. Over to you, Dr. Massey, to introduce the next series.
Well, again, time flies when you're having fun. This was really excellent, Richard. It's good sometimes to sit and put all that you've done together in the kind of presentation you've done, as our colleague Ramel said. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we will now move on to the next item, which is to introduce Dr. Don Scantlebury to host the second part of the presentation of the evening events. We should be having here Don to speak a bit on cardiac disease prevention and rehabilitation program of the Heart&Stroke Foundation of Barbados. As I said earlier, that is her second hat, but it is a hat that covers a service that has been sorely neglected in cardiac care in Barbados. She will be the host of the next session. So Don, over to you.
Okay, next we actually have, well, I'll tell you a little bit about the cardiac rehab program. It's a nurse-run program where there's oversight by myself, and there are a few nurses who manage patients as they come through. Okay, the phase 2 cardiac rehabilitation is the program where patients who have come through immediately following a cardiac event, be it cardiac surgery or heart attack or hospitalization for heart failure, and they're now stable, they come into the program and they get advice on secondary prevention, diet and exercise. And this is a prime setup for patients who need some kind of support. They come into the center and they meet people who have gone through things just like them. And my battery is going low, so let me do something to deal with that. They meet people just like them. And recently we have undertaken to reestablish a cardiac support group. And we now have a video on that. So I'll hand over to Michelle to get that started.
Yes.
Welcome to Heart&Stroke Foundation Barbados. Everyone that comes through this door has a story to tell. We have created a support system to help you navigate through this journey. Please reach out. We are here for you.
Hi, I'm Steve Barnett, and I was diagnosed with angina and had a couple of blockages in my right coronary artery. I had a double stent implant in November of 2018.
Hi, I'm Yvette Taylor.
I was admitted to the hospital in August of 2020 with stable angina, which led to open heart surgery. I am Jacqueline King. I presented with an abnormal ECG, which led me to be hospitalized for 4 days. After various tests were run, my diagnosis was ischemic heart disease/angina.
Hi, I'm Edison Theo Williams. A year ago, on my birthday, I suffered a mild heart attack. I was hospitalized, and it was determined that I had a blocked artery. My main artery had a 90% blockage, but the heart attack was mild. I was subsequently then referred to the Heart&Stroke Foundation.
My name is Ruth. Some years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertension. Having a family history of sudden death from heart attack, I was careful about diet, but exercised only spasmodically. In 2013, after having run a variety of tests, my doctor discovered that I had a buildup of plaque in the coronary arteries. One artery in particular was 90% blocked, and further down in the same artery was a 5% blockage. I had to undergo cardiac bypass surgery. That was 7.5 years ago. 3 months after surgery, I enrolled in the cardiac rehab program to exercise in a safe, monitored environment. And because of regular, consistent exercise, my blood pressure has normalized and my doctor reduced my medication to the minimum dose. I would encourage anyone to commit to a lifelong exercise program and, very importantly, in a friendly atmosphere with a caring, supportive group.
I was asked to join the support group. It is a buddy system. We talk to new interns here and tell them about the association and help to answer their questions and their concerns. It is what happened to me when I came. Other people helped me, and in turn, I want to help others.
As a member of the ultra-modern facility called the Heart&Stroke Foundation, I can say, for me, it did work as I was introduced to nutritionists, personal trainer, developed skill nurses who aided me on my journey. Along with that, we had a buddy system with other patients who were able to help you with your machinery, give you little pet talks, and a whole lot of information, which helped me to understand where I was at and following up from them on what they would have gone through. Certainly, this was encouragement for me to go to the next step. I am here to say, we want to be here for you. We understand, and this is the reason we have the support group.
When I first visited the cardiac rehabilitative unit, I was anxious and curious about my cardiac issues and had several questions to ask. I used my time in the waiting area to talk with other clients about their personal events. Additionally, the nurses made me feel very comfortable in this new environment. Patients having similar anxieties can rely on the cardiac support group to relieve themselves of any fear and anxiety associated with cardiac issues. We are all on a similar journey and can empathize with each other. We look forward to spending time with you.
And your heart matters. Your heart matters. Your heart matters.
Your heart matters.
And your heart matters.
And we'll now hear from one of those patients, Ms. Yvette Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvette Taylor, and I would have been diagnosed with stable angina a year ago. What is stable angina? Stable angina occurs when the heart muscles doesn't get enough oxygen to function properly. Your heart works harder when you exercise or experience emotional stress. Certain factors, such as narrowing of the arteries, can prevent your heart from receiving more oxygen. This was what was happening to me. I started experiencing chest pains, shortness of breath, dizziness, and always feeling tired. I had been diagnosed with hypertension a couple of years ago. So when these symptoms started to present themselves, I got worried and I went to the doctor to have a checkup. While at the doctor, my blood pressure was taken and it was extremely high. So high that the doctor told me, I can't send you back home. I have to call an ambulance and send you to the hospital. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go to the hospital, but nevertheless, I was obedient and I went. And when I got there, I was given a series of tests and was diagnosed with stable angina. I also had to get a test, which is called angiogram. And I did receive that test. And that test showed that my arteries were severely blocked. And so then I had to have open heart surgery, triple bypass. The morning when the doctor came to let me know that I would have to have heart surgery, to be quite honest with you, I was afraid at first. And when he started to, he drew a diagram and he showed me exactly where the blockages were and what he would have to do. He was very thorough. He was very humorous, which lightened the what he was saying to me, but at the same time, it did make me a bit fearful. But I'm a strong believer in God. I know that my life is in his hands. And so I committed myself to trusting him for the process that I was about to go through. It was also during the time of COVID, the beginning of COVID, where, having visitors come and visit you was not an option, just to drop off things for you, and that was it. So to be able to have someone come and sit and, encourage you and comfort you, I didn't have that much, but I knew that on the outside, I had a network of family and friends and people from my church that were praying for me. And so I did have the open heart surgery and it was successful. And today I am here to testify that God has brought me through that surgery. The truth is that I was so close to death. I was close to death, and God kept me and he brought me through it. And then after the surgery, I was referred to the Heart&Stroke Foundation. Heart&Stroke is a safe, monitored place where I could be rehabilitated, where I could learn that I had to exercise, I had to change my lifestyle, change the way I ate, change my diet and the things that I did, and also to be able to use the machines. And one of the things about Heart&Stroke is there's such a family atmosphere at the Heart&Stroke Foundation. I tell you, you go into that atmosphere and then the nurses are highly skilled, they are caring, they are patient with you, they encourage you. You feel like if you enter into a family. And so today I want to say thanks to, first and foremost, my Lord for preserving my life. Secondly, I want to give thanks for the doctors. I remember before I had the surgery, the team that would have be working on me during the surgery, each one of them came and introduced themselves to me. And I was surprised by that, but it made me feel comfortable in knowing who was there, who was going to be working to help me in my surgery. This afternoon, I want to say thanks to the doctors and the nurses. I want to say thanks to Heart&Stroke Foundation for what they are doing. And even now, as we embark on our support group, I just want others to know that, you know, when you get the symptoms, don't ignore the symptoms. Go to your doctor, get checked out. And also, I want you to know that we're here for you. We've walked this road. It's a year later for me, and I'm here. And I'm here to testify of the goodness of God in preserving my life, and also for the doctors and the nurses that would have played a part, and also for the friends that I would have received in Heart&Stroke Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. At this point, we were due to have another question and answer session, but because we are quite a bit of time over, I'm going to suggest that we move to the end. Next up is Ms. Ina Harvey, who is the Senior Vice President on the Heart&Stroke Foundation Board, and she will give some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scantlebury. Good evening to everyone. Reverend Belinda Martindale opened our session with words of reflection, and it is my distinct pleasure and honor to bring some closing remarks to this virtual lecture in celebration of World Heart Day under the theme, Use Heart to Connect to Your Heart. On behalf of the President of the Foundation, Kevin Farmer, and the CEO, Mrs. Michelle Daniel, I would first like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our featured speaker, Dr. Richard Ishmael, consultant cardiologist, Bracebridge Medical Center, for taking us through the development of cardiac services in Barbados and the region, and more importantly, for relentlessly championing, despite the challenges, along with a first-class team of our own Bajan cardiologists, as well as surgeons, nurses, and specialist support staff, the advancement of gold standard and unique cardiac services at the QEH, and for achieving a level of financial self-sufficiency. From the early 1980s as a founding member of the foundation, and now some 36 years later, we have this very special opportunity to have him with us today. His hard work, commitment, and stellar service to Barbados and the Caribbean over the years have resulted in many saved lives and happy, grateful families. In fact, some 30 years ago, you'd remember, Dr. Ishmael, my baby niece in Trinidad, land of roti and red solo, benefited from your care and expertise in pediatric cardiology. And my daughter, Dr. Ariane Harvey, knows you as Uncle Richard, having spent many hours with your children while at St. Gabriel's School. So thank you. We are profoundly grateful to him and to all of his esteemed colleagues, some of whom are here tonight. And we stand as proud Barbadians, proud Caribbean people of his impressive record of achievement. We'd also like to thank Dr. Raymond Massey, consultant, physician, and cardiologist, not only for his introduction and his comments tonight, but more so for the part he played in working with Dr. Ishmael to realize the dream of a cardiac wing at the QEH, and for his outstanding service as the pacemaker man, as dubbed by Dr. Ishmael. I fully endorse your suggestion, Dr. Massey, to have a series to adequately catalog all of these achievements. And I would go further to suggest that CBC TV adds this to their growing slate of excellent local programs and produces a docu-series. The foundation is very fortunate to have Dr. Dawn Scantlebury as our medical director for our cardiac disease prevention and rehabilitation program here at the foundation, and for managing the Q&A session. So patients and all of you here tonight, know that you are receiving world-class, state-of-the-art care with Dr. Scantlebury managing. I'd like to thank Ms. Yvette Taylor and the Cardiac Support Group for sharing your stories and for helping us to promote the work and the activities of the foundation. A lot of this sometimes is the best kept secret. And we need to have promotional videos such as these, and for you to speak out, to let everyone know what the foundation is about. It's more than a gym. and that we have a support group. I'm very pleased to see the participation of some 95 persons here this evening. And I want to use the opportunity to ask those of you who are not yet members of the foundation, please visit our website, register, encourage others, and if you can, volunteer your time with us. In closing, I want to say we must alter our lives in order to alter our hearts. For it is impossible to live one way and pray another. So let us use our hearts to connect body, mind, and soul and achieve our dreams. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ina. Thank you much, everyone. It was really great having everyone here. And I will definitely speak to Dr. Ishmael and Dr. Massey afterwards. Thank you very much, Ina. And I just want to wish everyone a great night and for staying the course of time in terms of being with us tonight. Enjoy the rest of your week and please stay safe and take good care. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you to
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good